Religion has been a part of human life for a long time, shaping laws, culture, language, and power structures. It has built massive institutions, gathered huge followings, and influenced almost every corner of civilization. But when you strip away the tradition, the ceremony, and the emotional attachment, what's left looks less like a path to truth, and more like a system designed to control people, often for profit, status, or influence. It doesn't start that way for most people. It begins with hope, with the need for answers, with a desire to understand why we're here and what happens after we die. Religion steps in and offers simple stories with clear explanations, usually involving a powerful being watching over us, rewarding obedience and punishing doubt. But what happens when those stories are examined closely? What happens when we ask whether the system behind them is really about spiritual truth, or about something more practical, like keeping certain people in charge? Most religions operate with a central message: follow this path, believe these things, and you'll be rewarded. If you don't, you'll suffer. That's not guidance. It's leverage. It's a setup that turns belief into a transaction. And in any system built on transactions, you have to ask, who benefits? Religious institutions are often tax-exempt. That means they collect money, often massive amounts, without paying the taxes that support the society they're part of. Some religious leaders own private jets, live in mansions, wear luxury clothes, and run organizations that take in millions each year. In the U.S. alone, religious institutions take in more than $120 billion annually. That's more than the GDP of some countries. They ask for money from people who are struggling, sometimes promising that giving more will lead to miracles. That kind of message shows up in sermons, TV broadcasts, and social media posts. Give more, get more. Struggling financially? Donate anyway, and your blessing is just around the corner. That's not faith. That's manipulation. And it works because religion often starts in childhood. People are raised with these ideas before they're old enough to think critically. They're told not to question. That doubt is dangerous. That asking too many questions could put their soul at risk. That kind of fear is powerful. It makes people stay in line, even when the answers stop making sense. When someone tries to step back and look at religion logically, they're often met with emotional pushback. Not arguments based on facts, but reactions rooted in fear, guilt, and group loyalty. That's how belief systems protect themselves. Not by offering new evidence, but by punishing those who ask for it. One of the oldest tricks in any scam is to make the person being tricked feel like walking away is the problem, that they'll lose something valuable if they question the offer. Religion does this with eternity. It tells people that if they don't believe, even just one part, they'll suffer forever. No second chance. No room for doubt. Just eternal punishment. That kind of thinking doesn't hold up in any other part of life. We don't call someone moral for accepting something just because they're afraid not to. We don't call someone wise because they followed instructions without checking if those instructions made sense. But religion frames obedience as virtue, and doubt as failure. The deeper you look into religious texts, the more contradictions you find. Stories that don't line up historically. Claims that go against basic science. Moral teachings that excuse violence, slavery, inequality, and hate. And yet, followers are told these texts are perfect. That every word is true. That if something doesn't make sense, the problem is with you, not the text. This kind of setup protects the institution from ever being wrong. It builds a system where followers must adjust their thinking to fit the belief, instead of adjusting the belief to fit the facts. In most religions, leaders hold a special status. They interpret the rules, deliver the messages, and often claim direct access to divine truth. That gives them enormous influence. They're not elected. They're not held accountable by external checks. And in many cases, they operate with legal and financial protections that shield them from scrutiny. There have been countless cases where religious leaders abuse this power, financially, emotionally, even sexually. And in many of those cases, Institutions protected them. When you look at religion as a system, you begin to see patterns. It collects money but gives little transparency in return. It builds authority around unprovable claims. It demands loyalty through fear. It discourages doubt. And it elevates a small group of people to positions of unchecked power. That's the definition of a scam, a setup where one group gains control, wealth, or security by convincing others to give up theirs. Some will say religion also does good. That it builds community, gives comfort, helps the poor. And sometimes, that's true. But community doesn't require belief in the supernatural. Comfort doesn't require surrendering your critical thinking. And charity shouldn't come with strings attached, like conversion, submission, or obedience. You can care for others without needing a God to tell you it matters. In fact, when you help someone without expecting a reward, in this life or the next, that's real compassion. What makes religion hard to let go of is how deeply it's tied to identity. People often inherit it from their families. It becomes part of their routine, their language, their worldview. Walking away doesn't just mean changing your beliefs. It can mean changing your relationships, your habits, and the way you see your place in the world. But that's also what makes walking away so powerful. It's not about rejecting everything. It's about reclaiming your ability to think freely. To ask questions without fear. To build a life based on what's real, not what you're told to accept. Religion survives not because it's true, but because it's built systems that make questioning it feel dangerous. Systems that reward conformity and punish critical thought. But more and more people are choosing to step outside those systems. They're not doing it because they want to rebel. They're doing it because they've seen behind the curtain. They've asked the questions. They've followed the logic. And they've realized that belief built on fear, guilt, and manipulation isn't belief worth keeping. The moment you stop being afraid to question, everything changes. You start to see patterns where you once saw mysteries. Patterns in how religions are structured, how they repeat the same techniques across cultures and continents, even when the names and rituals are different. You begin to recognize that almost every religion has something to sell. A version of truth, a version of salvation, a version of morality, and it's often bundled with obedience, exclusivity, and pressure to spread the message. This is why the methods look so similar. Promises of eternal life. Threats of eternal punishment. Special status for those who believe. A path that only works if you stay inside the system. It starts to sound more like a business model than a spiritual journey. And when you examine the money, that view becomes even clearer. Religion brings in billions globally every year. Megachurches operate like corporations, full marketing teams, branded products, TV contracts, social media strategies, and tax breaks. Leaders become celebrities. Donations fund private jets and real estate portfolios. Some organizations even use donor data to target higher income followers more directly. That's not a side effect. That's the model. And most followers never see where the money goes. They give because they're told it's what good people do. That giving will be rewarded, financially, spiritually, or both. They give while struggling with bills or medical costs. While leaders preach abundance from stage lighting that costs more than a full-time salary. There's no audit. No receipts. Just trust. But trust in a system that punishes transparency should always be questioned. When religious leaders refuse to open the books, when institutions hide misconduct, when difficult questions are deflected with emotion or scripture, that's not spiritual strength. That's avoidance. It becomes clearer that religion often works because it's protected from the same rules we apply to everything else. If any other organization promised impossible rewards, required total loyalty, punished dissent, and refused accountability, we'd call that dangerous. But when religion does it, it's called sacred. And that's part of the scam. Wrapping control in language that makes it untouchable. Calling manipulation faith. Calling fear respect. More people today are seeing this. Not out of bitterness. But out of clarity. Because they've begun to separate what feels good from what's actually true. They've realized that being comforted by a belief isn't the same as that belief being real. And the shift is growing. In country after country, belief is declining, especially among younger generations. In places like Scandinavia, Japan, parts of Western Europe, and even growing parts of the U.S., more people are openly saying they don't believe. Or that they don't see the point anymore. Because once you step outside of it, the hold it had starts to weaken. The stories sound different. The rules feel less convincing. The idea that morality requires fear of punishment begins to fall apart. And you start to wonder how you ever accepted it at all. The appeal of religion often depends on starting young. On being told the stories before you have the tools to examine them. But when adults hear those same stories for the first time, without pressure or guilt, they often respond with confusion. Not because they're closed-minded, but because they've developed the ability to compare, to test, to think freely. That's what makes the system work best when it starts in childhood. But even then, people wake up. They begin to remember the questions they were told not to ask. They revisit the doubts they once pushed aside. And they realize they were never wrong to question. Because any system that's afraid of questions probably doesn't have good answers. That's not the fault of the person who asks. It's the fault of the system that needs silence to survive. And yet, religion tells people that leaving it is the problem. That doubt is weakness. That those who leave are lost, immoral, broken. But that's projection. That's insecurity. Because when a belief is truly solid, it doesn't fear being tested. It welcomes it. That's how you know it's honest. And when it's not, you get pressure to obey. You get fear-based loyalty. You get leaders demanding money, authority, and trust, without offering real accountability in return. That's not spirituality. That's control. That's business. That's a scam, with emotional packaging. And like most scams, it continues as long as people stay quiet. As long as people stay afraid. As long as people don't speak openly about what they've seen, and what they've stopped believing. But that's changing. More people are speaking honestly about what they don't believe. About why they walked away. About the parts that never made sense. The contradictions they stopped ignoring. The guilt they stopped carrying. And when those voices add up, the pressure to stay silent breaks down. Because nothing about leaving religion needs to feel shameful. Choosing to think freely, to step away from systems that control through fear, isn't a failure. It's growth. And once you start seeing clearly, there's no going back. What comes next is an emptiness. It's freedom. Freedom to think without boundaries drawn by dogma. Freedom to ask questions without being punished for curiosity. Freedom to live a life that's honest, not just obedient. People find that they're still capable of kindness without commandments. Still capable of love without divine approval. Still capable of purpose without an eternal reward. They begin to build their lives on what's real, on shared experience, on reason, on empathy, on the knowledge that this life is the one they know they have. And that makes every moment more meaningful. Not because of what comes after, but because this is what we get. And that's enough. Religion promises certainty, but that certainty often comes at the cost of truth. It asks for trust, but rarely offers transparency. It demands devotion, but seldom earns it. When people stop giving it the benefit of the doubt, they start seeing it for what it is. A system built on stories, supported by fear, and held in place by the pressure to conform. And once that pressure lifts, once a person takes a breath outside of it, the world feels different. Clearer. Simpler. Honest. More people are waking up to that now. Quietly, thoughtfully. Without needing permission. And for many of them, that moment, the moment they stop pretending, is the first time they've ever felt truly free.